Those are the things I destroyed in the last like 7 days while trying to review the 3 new CPU. One Z890 motherboard. Possibly the same kind of motherboard. I RMA once, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to RMA it a second time. This one hurt when it died, my 5070 Ti. So kill the GPU at the same time. I still need to test it a little more. Okay, so Intel are launching today the 250K Plus and the 270K Plus. This is a Arrow Lake refresh. It's interesting. Basically, Intel decided to add 4 more cores to both of the CPU if you take the 240 and the 265K, and basically say, okay, we had the 285K that was $780 Canadian, which had 24 cores, and say, okay, we're not competitive, it take a lot of power in the high end. So let's focus to the mid-range. Let's have 24 cores in the 270K Plus, so we add 4 efficiency core. They're a little faster by 100 megahertz. And then let's compete on productivity, which is where the 265K had like a case. So basically they decided oh, the 250K Plus will compete with the 9600X from AMD, and the 270K will compete with the 9700X from AMD. So we're aiming for 199 USD for the 250K Plus and 299 USD for the 270K Plus. Now I'll make a short video. I don't have price for Canada, so I'm really curious how it will go, because the 265K launched at 550 Canadian, but now you could get it around 4 to 440 Canadian. So I'm curious where exactly it's gonna launch for the 270K Plus. So when Intel let me know in a couple of weeks that they would have CPU to test without any information, of course I start sending email just to see. I was like, okay, well, let's do a build at the same time. So it's half a review, half a build. Of course, Be Quiet were the first to answer, and I talked to them and I was like, well, it would be interesting to test different hardware that the build we did in November. So they did send one Darkrock Elite for the CPU cooler, and when I meet them at CES, they were like, oh, we're launching 1200 watt CPU, so the Pure Power 2 1200. It was an interesting discussion because basically they were saying some people like having a PSU that is overkill, because this way the fan stay at 0 RPM, and it's maybe only using 20-30%, but it's way quieter this way. They also send, I'm not gonna lift that, but they also send their Lightbase 600 DX. The DX is the version that comes with 4 Lightwing fan. So I received, Intel send a cute media kit with both of the CPU here. And one thing they were pushing in the marketing before I received the press kit was oh, we're supporting 7200 megahertz for DRAM, for DDR5 now. And I'm like, I'm not spending $800 to test that claim. I'm just gonna use my 6000 CL30 Expo RAM that I was using in my 265K build. But they also provided one RAM kit to be able to test that claim. Now, I'm not keeping the CPU or the RAM. They are loaners from Intel, and so I'm expecting by this week that we'll send it back to them. But they didn't send me a 265K in November when I did that build, and I kept that one as a sample. So this is where that review is interesting, because I already have the 265K. So I was like, oh, that's gonna be a great way to test it, because I already have all the hardware, just need swipe the CPU. One thing they were pushing was their Intel optimization platform. We'll talk about it a little more later in the video. So what happened? Well, I mean, when I received the kit, I was like, oh, that's gonna be super simple to test. I made a USB key with a new fresh install of Windows Pro. Then I went in BIOS, reset everything to default, boot back to Windows, everything is fine, shut down my computer. Now, it was interesting because in the Intel meeting, they were like, because it's just a refresh of Arrow Lake, we want to be able to, the CPU will be detected without a BIOS update, but like in the press guide, I think like 10 times it said, please update your BIOS, please update your BIOS. But the CPU will be detected without a BIOS update. So I was like, oh, and I checked, and there was an update on March 11 before I received the kit. So I was like, oh, okay, so I update the BIOS and then did a reboot. And then my thought was like, oh, let's try the memory. I'll just swap the memory, put the speed, and then I'll remove my 265K and start the process. So I turned off the computer, unplug everything, install the memory. Then I boot the computer and the LED of a MSI motherboard stay at red, which normally means a CPU issue. But I haven't changed the CPU, I haven't unplugged anything. So I try, the RAM would light up, but I try a bunch of time, didn't work. Then I try 1 stick of RAM, 2 stick of RAM, 1 to 4, the position of the DIMM, and nothing happened. I was like, well, it's weird because when I looked, the memory was compatible already with like my motherboard. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll just use my like memory and everything should be fine. So I plugged back my CL30 6000 megahertz memory and still stuck on red for the LEDs. So I tried everything from like one dim, every position again, and I was like, try a bunch of things, but after a day, like, and I talked to MSI support, and they were like, oh, try to use the reset BIOS button at the back of your motherboard, didn't work. Use a screwdriver to like, the GBA1 jumpers to like reset, didn't work. So I had to RMA the motherboard. Now the surprise is that I plugged the motherboard, I plugged my RAM, and I plugged the 250K plus, and surprise, like I plug it through the onboard graphics, and it works. So I was like, okay, fine, I'm just gonna plug my 5070 Ti, and we'll be good to go. Not detected. We plug it again, not detected. So apparently when I kill the motherboard, I kill my brand new graphic card. It's okay because I still had my 3070 that I'm trying to sell. So I plugged the 3070 and it's detected right away. So clearly it's the card. But one issue I had is that I could not run like, MSI had a Saturday morning, a different like BIOS revision again. But I cannot run the RAM at like, I can run it at 4800, which is the default. Then I plugged the Trident, and it was the same thing, 48. I could not go higher than that, so I decided to run all my benchmark at 4800. So at least, you know, I have data. Eventually, I was able to get the Trident working at 5600 CL32, but that's still quite far from like the 7200. And then like, you know, I think I installed like the CPU like 15 times and removing thermal paste and trying. And like, I had difficulty at the beginning. I could not get the 270K detected. Reseated the CPU, same issue. So I did the 250K plus, then my 265. Then I switched back, finally got able to get the 270K plus detected. Ran all the tests at like 4800 for the RAM. So basically what I'm saying is that like I feel that MSI motherboard is not like, there's a bunch of bugs like with the firmware. The RAM was working 5 at 600 with the 6000 with the BIOS that was December 25th. So I kind of wish I didn't update the BIOS because... Okay, let's talk about the spec first. The case is the Be Quiet Light Base 600DX, which come with 4 Lightwing fan. The PSU is the Be Quiet Pure Power to 1200 watts, and it has a cybernetic platinum, so it's a super high efficiency PSU with a 0 RPM mode. For the cooler, I'll use 2. I use the Be Quiet Dark Rogue Elite. And eventually I'll switch to the pure loop 3LX AIO because I realized during my testing that for some reason I was like throttling and having issue with the CPU, so I switched to my AIO. For the memory, like I said, I had two kits. I had my X5 from G-Skills, that is 6000 megahertz CL30, but the highest I could run it is at 4800. And Intel gave us a kit of Z5 Trident that can go up to 7200 at CL34, but the highest I could run it is 5600 CL32. So like I said, I feel that my motherboard has a lot of issue right now. So I hope for another BIOS update, at least for the memory support. The motherboard is the MSI Z890 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi. And because Intel were pushing their platform optimization on Windows, I did reinstall Windows 11 Pro just to do all the benchmark, but I'm going to be back to Bazite after. Okay, so let's build a computer. Like I said, MSI sent me a motherboard with a different serial, so clearly I broke it. And for some reason, they also included AM4 mount with the motherboard. So if I want to use my Z890 with AM4, I could. I decided to start with the 250K plus. So let's install the CPU first. Everything looked good for the pin on the motherboard. So we're just gonna drop the CPU. Looking good. CPU in place, and then we're just gonna lock it. Install my RAM first because at that point I didn't know if the RAM that created, if it's the RAM that created that problem, or if I just did an error of manipulation and killed my motherboard myself. Let's look at the Lightbase 600 next. You can see here that it's really clean because they made a door to hide all your cable. The case is bigger than the Lightbase 500. So I feel there's a lot of volume and a lot of space here. Like I said, that door mechanism is a good way to hide all the cable and the mess that you make at the back because the PSU will then get in front. So it's a well-engineered mechanism. You can mount more fan at the bottom if you want, and they use a clever mechanism to remove the feet. So if you decide that you want it horizontally instead of vertically, you can definitively do that. That's one of the main selling point of that case. In front, you have one USB-C, two USB 3, one headphone jack, one the power button, and then you have two buttons, one to reset and one to cycle to the different light mode or turn off the RGB if you want. You also have three fans inside, but they're not at an angle like on the Lightbase 500. So they will push the air out, but it will depend how you place your GPU. You can see the back of the case here. Um, Nothing special, but you can see that it's like a dual chamber where the PSU go and you have the fan on the other side. You have here a view under the case. And like I said, you can remove the feet if you decide to put it horizontally. They are super easy to remove. You can see the light bar at the front, so it will diffuse the light. And it's look very good at night. For power supply, we have the Power Zone 2 1200 watt with a cybernetic rating of platinum, so it should be a super effective unit with a 0 RPM mode for the fan. We have all the power specification here. It supports all the latest like PCI Express 5.1, and you get two 600 watt rail. So plenty, like if you have a GPU that consumes a lot of power. The PSU is bigger than like the pure power 1000 watt that I have, but it makes sense because it uses a 140 millimeter fan, not a 120. But this way it should be even better for noise level when it's not using the 0 RPM mode. You can see all the cables there. They have quite a bit of tension in them. They seem high quality. But at this point, I don't know what was wrong, if it was my memory, CPU, or which component. So I will just plug the minimum and using the onboard graphics and hoping I don't have any more issues. To make my life easier, I did plug the 2P8 cable before putting it in the case. So that should make things a little easier when routing the cable. So in that case, there's enough space around the P8 plugs that you should be able to plug them easily, but it's not always the case in a case that is kind of tight. But now we need to cool that CPU. So we have the Dark Rock Elite. It still comes with the standard magnetic screwdriver, which I use all the time for my build. It's also have our RGB around the Be Quiet logo. And the installation process is mostly the same that the Dark Rock 5 that I had before. You remove the central fan and just after you put the thermal paste and just adjust those two screws and you should be done. The contact surface is really flat. I'm assuming it's aluminum. But if you install one air cooler, most of the time you know how to install the other one. They give you thermal paste for one or two installation from the guide. I hate though that like they don't give you a full tube for that price point, but I get it. Most people install the cooler once and that's it. But of course they send me all this gear, so they send me their DC2 thermal grease, which is the one I'm gonna use because I knew already that I would remove the cooler a bunch of time. Kind of curious about the metal one, but I never installed liquid metal yet. So maybe when I'm done, I'll do that. You can see the view here from the back with the PS2 installed. Everything looked clean, but it's a mess. It's just that the door blocked the view. So it's give you the impression it's a really clean computer. Intel CPU seems larger, so I did a 12 dot of thermal paste, which is probably way too much, but whatever. Then I put the cooler, tied up the two screw, and put the middle fan back. So everything is in place to put in the case now. And I leave it at power, not quiet. We can see here the size difference between the LX 500 and the LX 600. They seem as wide, but like the other one is higher. On the first try, I forgot to plug the fan to the fan hub. So this is why they wouldn't light up. So the first thing I would do after installing the new CPU, like in that case, the 250K plus, I would go in OCCT and run for 3 minutes CPU burn mode, then memory, then VRAM, each for 3 minutes, just to see like how it would go. And I saw that like after a minute, I would get to like 105, which is the TG max. The PC would have never shut down, but I got the feeling when I was playing those tests that the CPU was throttling. Then I ran the same benchmark, and you see that I'm almost at the 105 there. But the big issue is that I'm running at only 83 watts, and the CPU can get to 252 at PL1 or 300 at PL2. And this is what I was like, okay, there's a cooling problem here. So I removed the Dark Rogue Elite and switched back to my AIO just to see if like I could like solve that issue because clearly that was not going the way I expected to be. So at this point to test that theory, I decided to switch to my AIO. I put the sticker, which is a smiley face that is like what the hell kind of look, which represent like all the issue I had this week. Not no one's fault, just a succession of like problems. Also, pro tip: use Windows Education if you want to see a really clean install of Windows 11. But now using MSI performance profile with PL2 set up to 292 watts. Now you can see that I'm easily pulling 220 to 250 watts. And eventually I got it to close to 300 watts while staying at 88, 89 Celsius. So clearly I was like thermally restrained with the air cooler. I don't think it's the cooler as much that like one time when I remove it, one screw were like higher than the other one. And so I just feel that like you need probably a IO if you're gonna put 300 watts of heat constantly. But of course, more in gaming, you wouldn't have that kind of behavior. Geekbench 6.6 with no optimization is first. In single core, we get a score of 3153 for the 250K plus and 3151. So basically neck to neck with the 265K, while we get 3288 for the 270K plus. And for the multi-core, you get 18, 9, and 16 for the 250K, 19, 273 for the 265K, and 20, 112 for the 270K. So a 5.5% increase between the latest two. So next, you activate the optimize function in the Intel Performance Manager. You got a 3.6% performance increase for the 250K plus. The 265K, I kept the same score. It didn't make a difference yet because Intel mentioned that maybe some of the function would be ported, but other one are built in the CPU. But for the 270K plus, I got a lower score by 200 points, which for me it's more like variance from run to run. Shadow of the Tomb Raider and Cyberpunk 2077 were the two titles that I had that support Intel optimization. So I decided to run the benchmark at 1080 high for Shadow of the Tomb Raider first. And you can see that I'm at 210 for like the 265K and the 250K and 212 for the 270K plus. So they're basically neck to neck. And I'm sure some of it's just variance from run to run. And then decided to use a 40p resolution and ultra wide with highest setting for Shadow of the Tomb Raiders. And you can see that basically I stay at 121. On even switching it's like it didn't make a difference for them. It was the same CPU. And the scenario repeat for Cyberpunk 2077. You can see here that there's no difference between optimized and not optimized. At 1080p high, which use FSR, I'm at 150. And at ray tracing low, which use DLSS balance, I'm at 65. So for me, the two hypothesis there is that I'm limited by my 3070 with only 8 gig of RAM. And I'm also limited at running my DDR5 RAM at 4800 instead of 6000 or 7200 like Intel ran. I think it would be interesting when I have more games that are on the list of Intel optimization tool to try them. But because I'm not keeping the CPU and today was the day when we could actually like show result and we need to give them back the CPU soon, I felt that like, yeah, that's fine. Um, maybe next time and the next generation, like we'll see where this tool is leading. But I got a pretty good idea already what I can do or not with this CPU. So what did I thought of the 250K and 270K plus? I think they were pretty good CPU. Intel were like, oh, this is the 270K is our like best gaming CPU ever. And I can see that like because the X3D CPU just for pure gaming are still the best, I feel that Intel went like, okay, we will not be able to compete at this like price level with them. So let's aim for mid-range and for all-around CPU, which kind of mean that like, yeah, if you're compiling code or you need something, the more core, the better. those CPU and productivity level versus the 9600X or 9700X will be super good to have. They talk about 15% more in gaming performance versus the 265K, and I think that like, yeah, you can get to the 15% more. Now, I know some people will be sarcastic, is that, oh, it's just a CPU refresh. But the issue is that with the cost of RAM apocalypse, I want CPU refresh. Like, now there's people, AM4 is maybe like the way to go if you need a new CPU. And I feel for like, for Intel, like with Arrow Lake, it's like, yeah, it's like I want them to push more generation of the CPU to at least give option. Now the issue is that if you need to move to that platform, it's still DDR5 only. So you're still gonna need to buy the RAM, and that's gonna hurt. Now, the other thing is that because of Nova Lake, probably at the end of the year, this is a dead socket. I think this is where it hurts a little more. It's good to have a refresh, so at least there will be 2 CPU generation, even if I don't like using the word generation here because it is a refresh. But like, the thing is that if you're someone that like buy a computer every 10 years, yeah, maybe it doesn't matter for you. And if you need a better all-around CPU, you'll be good. But like, if you're someone that would like to upgrade in a couple of years, AM5 is like, they say 2027, but I get the feeling that AMD won't have choice and like keep the socket alive longer. Because like, yeah, maybe there's a timeline where like in 2027 we were using DDR6 at like $150 for 32 gig, and it was amazing, but this is not the market we are anymore. So I think that it's maybe gonna start to slow down, you know, like the upgrade path, and at the same time, you know, pricing is gonna shoot up for like any new generation of console. And you see it like Valve announced their Steam machine, and now they push it back like to the end of the year, saying like, yeah, with the price of RAM and component, like we're unsure like when we can release, and it makes sense. So, but because for Intel, like I think they did what they had to do to be competitive in the mid-range. So it's a especially the 270K, it's a really good CPU. And if you give me the choice, yeah, I would grab the 270K like from the bunch. I have the 265K, so I wouldn't pay to get that 15% performance, except if I would cascade down my computer to give it to like a significant other or something like that. But I think that's basically where Intel is staying now. It's like, yeah, we have like something that is very competitive for the price. If the price in Canada is good, because they're aiming at $299 US. But we'll see. I'll make a short video when the price in Canada is maybe come from Friday. Looking at Memory Express, Canada Computer, and Neweggs and Amazon. But yeah, it's like they are very good CPUs, so that's making Intel more attractive. Few use cases just gaming. Well, an X3D chip is gonna be probably your best bet if you're able to afford. Now let's talk a little about the Be Quiet. Now the Dark Elite, I don't know, I had some problem. The installation is super easy. But 2 times, I clearly didn't install it well. You could see that like the thermal paste was super well laid and covering everything. But one time, I don't know if it's when I remove it, one of the bracket was at an angle like that. One time, one of the pin was like, and the mount move away. So it was not fully in. So I don't know if it was like a poor contact that I was doing. But at one point I was looking like, if I look at the performance of the 250K, I was like, I seem to be throttled. But I ignore it, and then when I reput my 265K, I was like, wait, I'm doing a CPU burn test, and I'm only getting 100 watt of power, and I'm already at 105, which is the TG max, and then it throttled itself. I was like, no, this is not right. Because I knew that I wanted to upgrade anyway to my AIO for future proofing, I decided like, you know what, let's retake quick measure, but like let's switch back to my AIO. So I don't necessarily think, because it's a 280 watt power cooling, I feel in the end like, yeah, it's super easy to install and it's a good cooler. It's just that like the Intel CPU are so like power demanding that like you can get an AIO and still like be at 80 to 90 Celsius when you do a full CPU load. So I think it make more, it's like, I feel we're getting to the limit of air cooling. Like it's like, I did prefer in general air cooling because you don't have a mess and it's like in your computer, it's easy to install. You can get a good, like, I don't know, PLS SSing or something like that for 40 bucks. Like, always makes sense. But I feel that when I was using those Intel chip, I was like, yeah, I definitively need the power of cooling of an AIO. Now that Pure Power 2 1200 watt, I really love. Most of the time, it's like, it's not even like running the fan when I'm like, if I'm just browsing or the computer is not doing anything, it's just staying there and not doing anything. And I was like, wow, the fan is off. That's really great. Now, so this power supply is definitively like gonna stay in my main machine. Now the light base 600, it was super interesting because I have the light base 500, so I have both cases next to each other. And I can see, because I also have the dark base 701, and I can see like how the development follow. It has this, for the 600, it has the same kind of thick panel with thumb screw that the 700 had, which is really, really good to like muffle noise. Now I really like the diffuse light bar. And like I said, the main point of this computer was the modularity that, oh, I can just remove the feet and put it vertically or like horizontally. So you lose that in the 500, but I feel this 500 has a more manageable like size and volume. But like for me, the last one that is on my desk is the one that I would get. So if I had a choice, maybe I would go with the 500. So yeah, that was chaotic 10 days. It was fun though. Like it's fun to like, you need to remember like, you know, take a step back and remember, okay, I'm using an edge case right now. Like I'm testing new hardware that haven't been released. The BIOS are not at maturity. There could be some bugs. It's just that it was a frustrating week when I was like, am I emitting like an AMI fail where like I break hardware on touch? Because like everything that I would try would make sense, but it would still fail. And I was like, what the hell is happening? Like, but in the end, I was able to test both CPU. Thanks for watching.